Hi, I'm Jerry. When I was 5, I ended up in an orphanage. Dad promised to come back for me. I had been waiting for 10 years, but he never did. Still, one day, our teacher told me to pack my things. I was overjoyed and ran to the exit, but instead of my dad, I saw 2 women. I'm Rita, and this is Charlotte. Welcome to the family. That's how I got 2 moms, and it was extremely weird. As soon as we walked into the house, they brought me to my room. I even choked on my gum. Everything around me was pink. Rita and I used to do fitness here. Don't worry, we'll redo everything for you soon. My new moms left me alone and went to cook dinner. Meanwhile, I sprawled out on the bed and relaxed. It was 100 times cooler than my bed in the orphanage had been. Soon enough, I was called to the table. I ate 3 dishes of pasta and asked for more. I'd never tasted something so delicious before. After dinner, my mom suddenly suggested we go for a walk. I politely refused and returned to my room. I didn't want everyone around to stare at us and laugh. That's why I refused the 2nd, 5th, and even 10th time they asked. They found something for us to do at home instead. We spent a few days decorating my room, and now I didn't want to leave it even more. But I got tired of sitting there alone soon, and my mom's told me some good news. You'll go to school tomorrow. Here you go, this is everything you'll need. The next morning, I grabbed my bag, stuffed sandwiches in it, and rushed to the school. I couldn't wait to meet my new classmates. But then, I ran into some girl, and her phone fell on the floor. Phew, it's working. Otherwise, you'd have to give me yours. I don't even have a phone. The girl stared at me in surprise. I decided not to waste any time and hold out my hand to her. I'm Jerry, I'm new here. Mia turned out to be my classmate. I spent the whole day staring at her like I was crazy. She kept smiling, but after the last class, she suddenly burst into tears. I immediately came up to her. What's wrong? We got the results of yesterday's test. I failed again. I was about to suggest Mia study with me, but then I remembered about my 2 moms. I can study with you, but my house is, getting renovated, so let's go to yours. No thanks. I'm better off on my own. On the way home, I kept thinking back to our conversation. What had I done wrong? It seemed she simply didn't like me. My mood could have been worse. Of course, my moms noticed right away. We hope this will make you feel better. Rita handed me some kind of box. I opened it and saw a brand new iPhone. I could have never dreamed of owning such a thing before, but now I was holding it in my hands. Thank you, this is the best gift ever. Now tell us what happened. After receiving such a gift, I just couldn't refuse to talk and leave. I had to tell them everything. I was sure they would laugh at my troubles, but to my surprise, they suggested a cool idea that would make Mia notice me. We took cocktails, pizza, and started taking selfies all over the house. The photos turned out to be really cool. I made a profile on Instagram and posted there with a caption, having a blast with the girls. One by one, my classmates started subscribing to me. Even Mia. She liked the post and commented, so cool. As you might have guessed, the next day, I became the most talked about guy in class. The boys added me to their secret group chat, and the girls kept shyly whispering during the breaks. Long story short, I was happy. But then it was announced we were going to have another test. I immediately tensed up. Who knew what they had been studying while I had been lying in my new room for days on end? But it turned out that things weren't that bad. I answered all the questions and was about to hand in the sheet when I suddenly saw the teacher approaching us. A couple of more seconds and he would have noticed Mia using a cheat sheet. I didn't want her crying again, so I scooched up and snatched the paper out of her hands. As you might have guessed, I got into trouble for that. At first, the teacher scolded me in front of everyone for cheating, and then called my parents to the school. That was the worst part. I simply couldn't let my moms come there. After all, I had just been accepted by my classmates. They definitely wouldn't understand, and I would become an outcast again. So I decided to find new parents on social media. I sold my iPhone to a high school student cheaply and hired 2 actors with that money. At first, everything was going great. My fake mom and dad listened to the teacher's complaints and nodded understandingly. When someone suddenly knocked on the door, it opened and I froze in horror. My moms were standing there. You should have seen what started then. They tried to prove, frothing at the mouth, that I was their son. My actors did not give up either and even composed a touching story about my childhood. In the end, I couldn't stand it and confessed everything. My fake parents ran away and I was left to blush under the strict gazes of my moms and teacher. But I could not endure that torture and left as soon as the teacher took my moms on a tour of the school. Everything was awful. I'd sold my iPhone only to disgrace myself and soon get punished for something I hadn't even done. When had my moms come to school at all? As soon as they got home, I asked them that question. We just wanted to ask the teacher how you were doing in the new school. Who asked you to do that? Don't treat me like a kid. You're acting like one. Why did you bring strangers to school? Well, you're not my family either. What's the difference then? Rita had tears in her eyes, and Charlotte silently walked away into the bedroom. I didn't want to hurt them, but you've got to agree, they had gone overboard with their case. I locked myself in my room and took out an old framed photo. In it, Dad was holding me in his arms at the zoo. I wished he was there at that moment. I barely slept that night, and in the morning, I trudged back to school. I was afraid someone had found out the truth about my family, and was right to be worried. Everyone in class immediately began to laugh at me, especially the worst bully, Henry. Hey Jerry, are your moms coming for you again today? No, they're covering up their wrinkles pretending to be his girlfriends again. Everyone roared with laughter, and I had to try to defend myself somehow. Those were my mom and aunt. My dad is on a business trip. Yeah, sure. He's also probably an astronaut, right? Everyone laughed again, and I simply couldn't stand it. I stormed out of the classroom and hurried home. Now I just had to find my father. Luckily, no one was at home. I rummaged through my parents' bedroom and found what I was looking for. There they were, my adoption documents. And there was the information about my dad. I opened my laptop, typed the addresses into Google Maps, and smiled. My dad lived just a couple of blocks away from us. I immediately ran there, and in just a half an hour, stopped near a small house. I could see him through a crack in the fence. It was my dad. He was humming some old hit and watering flowers. My heart was pounding wildly. I had already raised my hands to knock when a guy suddenly came up to my father. I squinted to get a better look at him, and almost cried out in surprise. It was my classmate Henry, the one who had bullied me before class that day. But he didn't look as confident as he had in school. With shaking hands, Henry handed Dad his diary. You failed again? What do they even teach you at school? You good for nothing. Henry closed his eyes and covered his head with his hands, and my dad slapped him on the back of his head. Henry immediately ran into the house. It was all very strange. I decided to find out everything from my father. Looked out from behind the fence and shouted, Dad, open up, it's me, Jerry. He opened the gate and stared at me as if he was seeing me for the first time. Who are you, and what do you want? It's me, Dad. I've been waiting for you, but now I've found you myself. Buddy, get out before I call the cops. I felt very hurt, turned around and ran away. My father had forgotten all about me, and I had been hoping to see him for so many years. What a fool I was. I didn't want to go home and wandered the streets for a long time. When it got dark, I sat on the bench at the bus stop and fell asleep. I woke up from the cold. It had rained at night, and I was soaked all over. Fortunately, a coffee shop had already opened nearby, and I went there to warm up. Ordered a double espresso and started watching the TV. They were showing some boring political news. All of a sudden, an urgent message interrupted the broadcast, and I saw my photo on the screen. Attention, 15-year-old Jerry Lewis is missing. If you see him, please contact the police. I pulled my hood up and stared at the floor, but then I heard the voices of my moms. They were crying and begging the audience to help them find me. I was stunned. No one had ever been so worried about me. I suddenly felt terribly ashamed. My moms had been right. I was really acting like a little kid. I went to the nearest flower shop, bought 2 bouquets, and the first bus home. When I came in, my moms almost strangled me with their hug. God, Jerry, you scared us to death. Where were you? I went to see my father, but he pretended he didn't know me. My moms suddenly looked at each other and turned pale. Jerry, we have to tell you something. Many years ago, your father and we were married. The doctor forbade me from getting pregnant, but we really wanted a baby, so we decided on surrogacy and hired Charlotte. At first, everything was going fine, but when you were born, your dad left us for another family. He had another son with his new wife. I almost went crazy with grief. I felt horrible and even stopped recognizing people for a while. They sent me to a psychiatric hospital for treatment. When you were born, I gave you to your father to raise. For 5 years, he felt torn between you and his other family, and in the end, his wife made him choose. He chose them and left you at the orphanage, promising to return one day. They kept me in the hospital for 5 years. When I came out, I wanted to come get you at once, but that wasn't easy with my diagnosis. I spent 10 years fighting for you. Charlotte was the only one who supported me. We started living together and were finally allowed to take you home. I grabbed my head and slowly sank down on the sofa. I couldn't wrap my head around it. Come on, say something. I'm in shock, really, but thanks for telling me the truth, and for not abandoning me after all. I hugged my moms and suddenly felt happy. It was unusual and pleasant. Just imagine, I had a real family now. I didn't stop smiling even the next day and came to school in a great mood. But then Henry showed up and tried to ruin it. I saw you hanging around my house. What, did you want to see what it's like to live with my father? No, that tyrant is all yours, brother. What are you talking about? We are not brothers. Half brothers, it turns out. Ask your father. He will tell you everything himself. And if you make another joke about my moms, you'll be laughing in a hospital bed. I left Henry standing in the middle of the hallway with his mouth open and went to class when Mia suddenly stopped me. I wanted to thank you, well, for your help during the test. No one has ever done something like that for me. It was nothing. Mia didn't let me finish and kissed me. I definitely was not expecting such a turn. And this is for you setting an example. You see, I have 2 dads and I was afraid to tell anyone about it. But you have already shown that family isn't something that you should be ashamed of. Since that day, Mia and I have been hanging out, and now we are a couple. You might be surprised, but Henry and I have started to talk. He followed my advice and went to the school psychologist to get rid of his fear of his father. And I started to go on walks with my moms and am no longer afraid of curious stares. And what kind of relationship do you have with your parents? Tell us in the comments down below.